And that, my friends, is going to complete the Spellbreak Academy in-game awareness series. Hope you all enjoyed this three-parter and eagerly await the next installment of Spellbreak Academy, where we will likely talk about nothing but combat. Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Spellbreak Academy, this time episode number 4. It'll be combat basics, no additional parts, no additional talking points, just all about combat today. I am finally making good on my promise from last Spellbreak Academy, which is about 3 months ago. So here we are. Spellbreak Academy is back, the original Spellbreak Academy. You might have seen some being put on by Proletariat, presented by Element. This is the original series where the name got yoinked, but it's okay. We're here. Episode number 4, coming right at you again. Combat basics. Now, this will be a free-form video. I do not have very much in the terms of a script to go by, so the goal of this is so that you can get sort of a carbon copy of how my brain works and how I'm going to be applying all of these concepts into Spellbreak itself. I don't want to have something scripted. I don't want it to be fake. I want it to be something that you can understand coming from me and the way that I think, so that maybe if you'd like to replicate it, it'll help you in your games. Everybody who has seen me play knows that, maybe with the exception of Frostborn or just the Frost Gauntlet itself, I don't really have all that great of mechanics. So how do I win my games? I do it through my sheer decision making and the knowledge that I have of the game. It's why I'm a caster and not a competitive player. But enough of that. We're going to be getting into the combat basics for Spellbreak Academy. Real quick before we start, if you do like this sort of thing, if you like instructional Spellbreak videos, and also some other stuff that I'm going to be coming up with here soon, I'm going to be making some headway on Crimson Desert, as well as the new Nier game coming out in April. Then be sure to give a like after we're done here, and also subscribe to the channel. Without further ado, let's talk about these combat basics. So we're going to be talking about 5 concepts. It's going to be, number 1 is going to be the pocket, which is really just optimal ranges for your gauntlets. We're going to be talking about number 2, positioning. We're going to be talking about number 3, important elemental interactions. For number 4, we'll talk about special interactions and certain things in the game that kind of allow for animation canceling and different sort of things. And for number 5, we're going to be talking about proper building, one of the most important concepts in the entire game, making sure that your build is all well and good. It's covering a lot of stuff. And without further ado, let's get into it. So our first slide here, going to be all about the pocket. Now, this is kind of a slang term from me to you. This is sort of something that I came up with whenever I was watching competitive play, and also applies to my style of play as well. I'm a very sort of keep them at arm's length style of gamer. So what I like to do is basically just stay out of the range that they can deal damage to me, and I want to be the one dictating the pace of the game. So with this concept, the pocket, basically it is the optimal range at which a given build optimally functions. So what this means, and I like to use this on a Pyromancer, for example, a lot of players think that Pyromancer is kind of like on the lower side of the meta, and I'm kind of in that field as well. I still think it's fairly good, but one thing is that it excels in very, very well is teaching you what the pocket is. And this is what I base the pocket off of, is basically that optimal range between close and mid-range, that fireballs can almost always hit your opponent as long as your aim is good and as long as you have a little bit of prediction to it. So you don't want to be too far away from your opponent to where they can easily sidestep fireballs, and you also don't want to be too close so that they can out DPS you with toxic, or you get touched by your own combust on Pyromancer. So somewhere within that little happy medium is what I call the pocket. It's that optimal range that your build functions at. And there are different ways that you can maintain it. There are different strategies that you can use to sort of, adapt your playstyle to if the pocket gets breached, or if it's too big of a distance between you and your opponent. And I'm going to get into that as well. Basically, the pocket is largely based on whatever gauntlet that you're running, and it's going to be based on whatever handles close to mid-range for a chosen build. So this applies to any sort of build. You could be running Frostborn, and typically your offhand is going to cover close range. So the pocket would be based on whatever you have on your offhand. Let's say you want to do Frostborn with a Toxic Gauntlet. Your pocket's going to be very, very small to accommodate the maximum damage you can get with Toxic. And then anything beyond that pocket, that's where we start using other options. Now, what other options you might think? Well, I'm going to get into this third point here. The pocket must be maintained during a fight for a comfortable feel, and a breach of the pocket can lead to suboptimal results. You can sacrifice a resource to maintain the pocket, or you need to switch up your play style to provide extra options to then maintain a different style of pocket. So for Frostborn, let's say, like I said, you have a Toxic Gauntlet, for example. You want to be up close and personal for that style of the pocket, but anything beyond that close range bubble, you want to be using your Frost Gauntlet. And this applies to any sort of class that you want to run. Let's say you're doing Stone Shaper and your offhand's Fire. So your pocket, the pocket you want to operate in, it's a little bit different for Stone Shapers, so maybe it's a bad example, but you want to be operating around your offhand for your pocket, and then any time that the opponent becomes grounded, you want to be using your stone. And the pocket kind of morphs in that sort of instance. Like say you're running an offhand Fire, it would be about the same size of pocket as you're running as a Pyromancer. But whenever a certain condition is met, you can shift the pocket into providing more damage with your Stone Gauntlet. Let's say you're running Toxicologist, for example. Just like that Frostborn build with your offhand Toxic, your pocket is going to be very, very small. And what you want to do is maintain that pocket as much as possible, or wait until you're close enough to maintain that pocket to be shooting your Toxic Gauntlet. It will be about maybe half the distance between you and the edge of the pocket, say if you were running a Pyromancer. So you want to be in that optimal range where you can hit all your toxic pellets, and also where you can easily outbreak your opponent. And then anything that goes beyond that bubble, you want to use your offhand. Usually what you want to do is run a Frost offhand so you can cover mid to long range. So you see a lot of Toxicologists run this, and basically what they do is they ignore the pocket at first. They go ahead and land a leading ice shot. And basically what this does is it elongates the pocket just a little bit. You land your Frost, and then from there, if you're in close range, then you maintain that close range pocket, your optimal range, where you can let your Toxic Gauntlet just do its thing. And this can be expanded upon for different strategies. Like say you just want to garden with your Toxic Gauntlet, you want to use those long range pellets to apply corrosion, then obviously your pocket's going to be bigger, but you need to just pay attention to those more close range engagements where you switch up your play style to then accommodate a more close range engagement. So one last example that I will use, let's go ahead and talk about Conduit. Conduit is one of those that almost has an infinitely long pocket, but it's also one that you need to really focus around your offhand, because once that pocket is breached, then that is going to be a big problem for you if the opponent is too close of range. So what a lot of conduits do is they run Fire offhand. It really covers pretty much the same range as what we said earlier with Pyromancer. And anything closer than that optimal range, you're going to be getting hit a little bit by your own Fireball, but the way Conduit builds work, it should still provide you some decent close range engagement. So anything mid to close range, you want to be using your offhand Fire for that more optimal range, that optimal damage. And then anything beyond that sort of edge of the pocket, you want to be using more of your Lightning Gauntlet. So I think by this point you understand pretty well what the pocket is and how it works. Let's get into the second part of this discussion, which is going to be positioning. And this is so important for Spellbreak. So positioning is king. And you'll notice this first point, high ground, high ground, high ground. Notice that there's no exceptions to this. I do not put any exceptions to this. The only exception that can maybe think about is if you have dominated your opponent in positioning, you're dominating the fight, and you're leaving the high ground to go finish them off with a quick shot or two. Like, that is the only time you should abandon high ground. High ground, it is so important. What it does is it gives you a better field around the area, so you are more aware of any potential third parties that could be coming your way. You're also putting yourself at a very, very advantageous position. And what it does for your opponent's point of view is, first of all, your opponent has more cover to try to shoot around with this. Usually when you do high ground, you either have a mountain or a tower. There's this little ledge that you can peek over and then shoot down from above. Well, if you go behind that ledge, then your opponent can't shoot you, and you can basically dictate your pace of the game. And this will get into another concept I call one-way angles, which you'll see in the second point, but I'm going to continue on the high ground thing here. So basically, the big takeaway here is your vantage point and the increasing amount of angles that you have. Also, from your opponent's point of view, in order to consistently deal damage to you in the fight and do it reliably, basically they have to match your height to some extent to then have an easier time of doing it. And if they want to approach your immediate position, they have to burn mana for levitation. They have to use a rune, or they have to use a class skill. There is something that they have to use to get to where you already are. And this puts you in a great advantage in a fight. It makes it so that you have more shots to use. You don't have to worry about one particular resource of movement, and you're able to dictate the pace of the fight, which is paramount in Spellbreak, especially at a high level. Now, I'll talk about angles here. Angles should be your bread and butter, okay? Particularly one-way angles. And what do I mean by one-way angles? Well, Spellbreak is a third-person game. So what this means is that if you have your face in a wall, well, the camera is going to be positioned in such a way that you can be facing a wall, but you're actually seeing through or around your shoulder. So what this means is that you can see your opponent, but he can't see you. And this is more important in games like say PUBG, for example, or Fortnite, but in Spellbreak it's very, very important as well. This is less important in this game, admittedly, because of all the movement in the game, but there is still a very, very effective way you can use this, notably peeking over a ledge like with high ground, or my favorite, if there happen to be crates or barrels near you, you can hide behind them and then just jump out and try to hit your shots. Now, of course, you're not going to be successful this every time, but there are still certain one-way angles that you can utilize around trees, around walls, around different ramparts, that sort of thing. Just easier ways for you to land your shots than your opponent, what I call one-way angles. Of course, building off of this, we'll go ahead and, with our movement and positioning, get into moving within the safe zone. And basically what you want to do is you want to utilize your movement within the safe zone to preemptively seal a position of high ground or otherwise position of dominance and vantage to provide an optimal field of view and allow for the most angles possible. Basically what this means is get to the next safe zone before your opponent. This is the safest way to do it. Of course, sometimes this isn't always feasible, but it is optimal. So let's say that the zone is closing. Let's say it's the third rotation and it's a big rotation, and there's a lot of ground to be covered for people who are outside the zone. If there is a tower in the next safe zone, you want to be taking that tower so that you have the high ground and you have it before everyone else. So as they're trickling in, you're able to see them come in, you're able to see them burn resources, and if you have a long-range gauntlet, which you should almost always have a long-range gauntlet like Frost or Lightning, then you can land just free damage by just utilizing that one-way angle that we talked about earlier. It is so important. You also don't have to give up your position and risk getting damage. If you need to move during the safe zone, you have more vantage point. You don't have to burn as many resources. It is a huge, huge advantage for you and your gameplay. And this is basically just all talking about before a fight. You want to make sure to have things established. But while you're in the middle of a fight, optimal positioning within the combat is key, and is the mastery of this that will result in faster exiles, which means less damage taken and less susceptibility to third parties. I cannot tell you how many times I see people complain about the amount of third parties, and to an extent it is warranted, but what really this is telling me is that your fights are taking too long, you're not paying attention to the things around you during a fight, and also your opponent is just doing a really good job of providing a lot of pressure. So if you can optimize your positioning during a fight and take high ground while you are still moving around and dodging spells in the middle of a fight, that is going to be key. So let's say you start out fighting just outside of Stonetooth Mountain. You're on relatively equal ground. If you can rotate yourself around to the upward side of the slope of Stonetooth Mountain to where you're on a higher position than your opponent, let's say you're playing Pyromancer, for example, with the Frost offhand. First of all, you have those more angles that you can use due to your heightened positioning. There's not really anywhere that they can run because there's not a whole lot of terrain, there's not a whole lot of trees. And also, you have an easier time landing your fireballs because it's much easier to shoot from above with a fireball, hitting the ground, letting that combust proc, than, say, trying to shoot them out of the air or up against a slope that could stop your fireball prematurely. So just think about this sort of optimal positioning within combat. Always keep your mind active. Make sure that you do not autopilot during these fights. You want to say, how can I improve my positioning? How can I give myself an edge during this fight so that I can come out on top more times than not? That, if you can master that, you're going to be in a really good spot during Spellbreak combat. Going into our next topic, we have important elemental interactions. This is more of a basic topic. Basically, you just want to pay attention to some of the more useful ones. There's a lot of them. I don't have them all here, but you should still know these if you're just starting out Spellbreak or if you just need a quick refresher. So starting out, everybody knows what Dragonfire is. Toxic plus fire, especially a Toxic Cloud plus fire, it is a great source of quick AoE damage. Also can apply multiple ticks of 20 if you get them in a good spot. I forget if it applies corrosion or not, but anyway, that's something else you might want to think about. Not only is Dragonfire a great source of quick AoE damage, it also does a good job at blinding the player that it hits. So if you catch them right in the middle of a Dragonfire, basically all they see is green flames, and while they're sitting around just trying to figure out how to get out of your Dragonfire or what sorts of movement they're going to use next, you then have an opportunity to sort of land up another shot if possible, so that you can get even more damage out of it. Flash Freeze, this is very situational, but Flash Freeze can block certain spells, and the spells that it blocks are going to be fire, wind, and lightning. It also blocks firewalls as well, and does some interesting interactions with some other things, but the main thing you want to use it for is, first of all, for freezing, because freezing is very important in Spellbreak right now, but also blocking certain spells. So let's say you're up against a conduit. They are most likely running either lightning and wind or lightning and fire. You can put down a defensive flash freeze at wherever you happen to be, and you can then have a free window to start landing some ice lances very, very easily. I actually have a clip from way back when of me being across the ravine. My opponent is trying to use fire. And basically what I do is I say, okay, you're going to try to use fire. I have frost, put down a flash freeze, and then just shoot through the walls of the flash freeze. And it was 2 free snipes. You get a huge advantage in the middle of a fight, and then you just finish them off with a fireball, and you win. And I just won the game that way. And this can be applied to a lot of different situations. Let's say that you are already getting pelted, put down a flash freeze, stop the damage, get a quick reset off if you need to, or if you want to use it more offensively, line up that ice lance like we said earlier. Going into our next topic here, Stone and Fire, almost the exact opposite. You want to be using this offensively, and what it does is it creates an area of effect on the ground. What I'm thinking of is having a source of fire on the ground and using your shockwave through it, so you make those miniature firewalls. This basically makes it to where you have a grounded hazard to force enemies to take certain positions. Obviously, they don't want to be standing in fire. They can opt to do it. It's just not optimal. They will lose health while doing it. And also, it creates a little minefield for toxicologists. And this might be very important for some of you, because toxicologists tend to be some of the more bursty mages out there. So if you have the ground full of fire and there's nowhere for your opponent to use Vanishing Mist, or if there's just more hazards in general for them to use their Shadow Step through, then you're going to have a much easier time with that fight, and also your Shockwave will deal more damage because of the fire. So something to think about there. It's a very, very useful tactic. Our last little elemental interaction here, Lightning, can provide free stuns with Ice Trails, Toxic, and Tornadoes. If you're up against a Frostborn and you have Lightning, you can just shoot their Ice Trail and they're going to be stunned unless they're running Harmony, which I'll get into later. Same thing for Toxicologists and their Toxic Clouds, and honestly their Toxic Trails as well, or their Toxic Puddles, I mean. Toxic Puddles a little bit less so, but Toxic Clouds are going to be great for this. You can put down a Toxic Cloud and then shock it, and it'll provide a wide range of AoE. You can also do the same exact thing for Tornadoes. Tornadoes nowadays are more reliable for this sort of thing, because not only do you have a big source of stun, but Tornadoes will also pull enemies in towards them, so it's almost a guarantee if you place it correctly. And we can also combo this into Lightning Strikes, which you can nail down an opponent. You can put that little AoE up, and then it's really hard for them to get out unless they really know what they're doing. So something to think about. But in all this, just make sure that you're wary of Harmony for the more CC-oriented interactions. So if you're going to be using a Flash Freeze more offensively to try to get a quick freeze to seal it out, or if you're going to be using Lightning for stuns at all, just keep in mind that Harmony is a thing. It's pretty popular in the meta right now for some tank builds. So just keep in mind that your CC might mean nothing. So again, just keep that in mind. And that's going to conclude our important elemental interactions section. Sorry for my verbal stumbles there. We're going to be getting into special interactions. Basically, what this means is it's anything other than elemental interactions that are in the game that you can use that you might not previously be thinking about. And the number one thing here I have is boulder combos. This is part of what makes Stone Shaper a really, really good option in the current meta right now. I currently have it ranked at B tier just because the shockwaves can be gimped a little bit, but if you utilize your boulders correctly, you can be just like Darkbreakers or Megaverse. They came in second and first place respectively in the recent Solos tournament for Element, which I cast for, by the way. It's where I get this from. Stone Shaper can definitely be a very, very good tool, and it's because of those boulder combos to a great extent. Basically, what boulders allow you to do is it allows you to fire 2 boulders in rapid succession, and then with very little cooldown on the throwing animation, you can then combo it with another spell. So one of the more easy things to do. Oh, it looks like I have a subscriber coming in. My alerts never work when I'm on stream, but they're working now. Look at that. But anyway, whenever you're doing your boulder combos, you can use 2 boulders and then combo it into a fireball, or you can combo it into another shockwave, which deals massive damage. Usually you're upwards of 100 damage in one combo, which is crazy. It's more than a base legendary frost, and it's even more if you're running focus mana at the time. Another one that's a little bit easier to figure out is reclouding with Vanishing Mist. Basically, if you have a Toxic Cloud up and you are a Toxicologist, you can enter your Toxic Cloud to get Vanishing Mist, which is a little dash with invisibility. Obviously, you can use that as many times as you want, as long as that Toxic Cloud is up and running. So reclouding with Vanishing Mist is a very special interaction that a lot of Toxicologists like to use, as long as it is safe to do so. Just be very careful. Firefly interactions, the main one that I want to talk about is using your dash into a Firefly or into a Firewall as a Pyromancer. I tried to put one up for each class, just in case you didn't realize. But Pyromancer, Firefly, basically, if you use your dash on the ground right before you hit your Firewall, it'll transfer the momentum from the dash and combine it with the flight speed of Firefly, so that you fly much, much faster and much further. I also have a very good guide on this for Pyromancer, so if you want to check it out, I will try to link it in the description below. Turns out I have the hiccups. Isn't that cool? But in any case, on to the next class. Tempest, Wind Running, and Rady Hopping, bread and butter of the Tempest class. The whole reason you run it, really, unless you just want to Bunny Hop Squall, which is a problem in and of itself. That's fine. So Tempest, Wind Running. I also have a guide on this. Make sure you check it out. Basically, what you want to do is you want to be moving sideways and rotating your character while firing wind shears at a surface or a wall or a tree, so that you carry that impulse momentum into your running speed. It's very, very useful for traversing through Spellbreak, and also gives you that extra little bit of speed to escape certain interactions or engage in certain interactions. It costs a little bit of mana, but not all that much. Now, Rady Hopping is great for getting that increased height. And it is used by entering your tornado while also putting a wind shear on the ground. You don't really have to combo it with anything. It's just really, really useful. Basically, how this works is that the Wind Surge skill of Tempest, the very first thing you unlock, gives you that 65% slow fall, or decreased gravity, rather, so that whenever you put down an impulse, that extra little decreased gravity gets carried over into your updraft skill, which forces you into the sky through a tornado, and that combined gives you a much higher jump, and it's very, very useful for trying to land frosts at the apex of your Rady Hop. It's also very useful if you want to just get higher than what you normally could to traverse, let's say, a tower or something. So keep that in mind for some special interactions. Conduit Rune Swap is a very, very specific special interaction, but it's one that's used in competitive quite a bit, as well as some of the best conduits you'll find use it out here in the Hollow-Lands. Basically, what you want to do is you want to run Spellslinger, have an extra rune in your inventory, and you want to basically what you can do is you can press that whatever slot your inventory is in, or whatever slot of inventory that your rune is in, you can then equip that rune, swap it out with Spellslinger, and then once that rune comes in, it has that cooldown to sort of work its way through. But you can negate this by using a Lightning Strike sorcery, activate your Overload skill, and then you can use the rune immediately. It's really great for some builds. I know a lot of conduits run teleport on their off slot, so that in the middle of a fight, if they're using Shadow Step or Dash or Spring Step, and they're out of options to continue the fight, or they're in a really bad spot, they will swap off to their teleport rune, put down a quick little Lightning Strike sorcery, and then all of a sudden they're like 200 meters the other direction. So it's very, very useful. A lot of players like to use Fly with it as well, so keep that in mind. And our last special interaction is going to be sorcery canceling. If you've watched any competitive player, or you've watched any element event, you would have seen this at least once. Basically what this does is by holding your sorcery, it allows you to float up in the sky for about 5 seconds. An interesting thing about this is that it transfers momentum to some extent. What you see this a lot on is people using Frozen Alacrity as a Frostborn, and once they get to the end of their trail, they will sometimes jump and then use their sorcery cancel to carry that Frozen Alacrity momentum while they are trying to, let's say, hop a ravine or something. It's much, much better than using Levitate, because Levitate will actually sap the momentum from your Frozen Alacrity the second you use it. So sorcery canceling can be used in quite a number of ways to sort of mitigate that. Also, if you're falling down from a very, very high place and you have a lot of momentum going downward, holding your sorcery will cause you to freeze that downward momentum. It will cause you to then float, and you can cancel that out to then start levitating straight upwards yet again. It is great for mixing up your movement. You can use this off the Bedrock skill as well. You can really use this on any class, but I see it a lot on Frostborns and classes that use a lot of dash runes. So keep that in mind and definitely use it well. It's a very, very useful interaction. Going on to our last point, we're going to kind of tie this all together, and that is going to be the proper building. And basically what this means is just have a purpose in mind for your final build and have a win condition. As you can see, I misspelled win condition. Apparently, I was tired whenever I was writing this, but just erase that D. It is win condition. We want W's. We want to be the last one standing in our Battle Royale matches. We want to be the highest score at the end of our Clash game. So win condition. And this applies to everything about your build. Talents, classes, offhand gauntlets, and runes. Pretty much in that order of importance. Basically, or rather, maybe talents and classes can be swapped, but talents are especially important. So a quick example I have for you here is, let's say you want to run a very, very high damage build, and you just want to blow up players that are very, very close to you, and you don't want to give them any chance to fight back. So what you want to do is you want to think about all the damage mods that are in the game for talents, and you want to think about what can increase your access to access those damage mods. So typically the build would be the Glass Cannon build, which is focus mana for 1 cost, fervor for 3 costs, and then recklessness for 1 cost. And by equipping this to a class such as like Toxicologist or Tempest, you can pretty much 3-shot your opponent, and it's pretty crazy. You can also apply this to Frostborn because they have that extra little damage mod on their Ice Prism, which basically just adds that extra 35% damage. It's actually kind of crazy to their Ice Lance. So something to think about there. You can actually 2-shot people with that build. Don't recommend it, or you'll get frowned upon, but if you want to use it, go ahead. Also, to kind of change things up here, that's one way you can use it in a Battle Royale setting. If you want to use a certain build for Clash, for example, for talents, you might want to run Scavenging, so that every time you exile somebody, you get that extra little bit of health and shield back. You might also not want to run Thirsty because you don't get a whole lot of potions. And you might want to run Focus Mana or Runic Fluency for extra movement or extra damage. Just basically you want to think about what you want to do with a build, and then you want to apply that to your talent choices and your classes. For your offhand gauntlet, a good rule of thumb that I like to follow is just cover whatever range that your main hand gauntlet doesn't have. So if you're a pyromancer, you're not going to be good at long range. I pick up a frost gauntlet. If you're running a toxicologist build and you have your toxic main hen, it doesn't cover long range. I'm going to be running a frost gauntlet, for example. If you're running a conduit, my lightning does cover long range. It covers a little bit of mid range, but my close range is really lacking. Then run a fire or a toxic gauntlet. It's really that simple. Just basically either mitigate what you don't already have, or you can double up on your strategy and say, let's say, for example, you're running a pyromancer class and you want that extra AoE of the toxic gauntlet for that dragonfire combo we talked about earlier. Then basically you're going to be doubling down on its ability to play at mid-range and close range, and you want to avoid taking long-range engagements at any turn that you can. So it's just stuff to keep that in mind. It's going to alter your playstyle a little bit, and we'll get into playstyles in the next Spellbreak Academy. But for this one, really focusing on just getting that build right. Of course, runes, same thing as offhand gauntlets. Just cover whatever your specific build needs. If you're a conduit, you want to keep that long range. Maybe you run flight or teleport. If you're a pyromancer and you want to keep that mid-combat movement up, then you run a dash or a spring step. If you're a toxicologist, you get a lot of value out of outbreak and going invisible. You want to run an invisibility rune or preferably a shadow step. So just think about that kind of thing whenever you're building, and it should give you a long way. It should let you go a long way. Just keep all this in mind. Make sure you're tying your build together in conjunction with your particular playstyle and your win condition. And what do I mean by win condition? Basically, whatever is going to take you to get to win a fight to get an exile. So let's say you're a Frostborn. Your main power is going to lie in your Ice Lance and your Frost Gauntlet. So you want to be playing back, land as many Ice Lances as possible, so that you can exile the opponent in a much more effective way. Keeps you safe, gets you an exile. That is your win condition. You always want to be playing to that whenever you are in the HoloLands. Same thing if you're a toxicologist. Your bread and butter is going to be staying close and dealing as much outbreak damage as possible. So make sure you build around it to achieve that win condition. Like, say, run Runic Fluency to give you an extra charge of Shadow Step, so you have more damage, more outbreak potential. So you can get in there, land 3 quick outbreaks, fight is done. Or if they get away, you have a Frost Gauntlet on hand, give them a quick shot, and then they're done. Just make sure you're playing to your win condition. And that is going to be the end of Spellbreak Academy episode number 4. Just a little quick recap and conclusion. Make sure you maintain the pocket whenever possible during fights. Be proactive about your positioning, both in and out of fights. Make sure your brain is working up there. Don't autopilot. Learn your important elemental interactions like Dragonfire, Flash Freeze, Stone and Fire, and also anything that can stun out of lightning. Those are the 4 most important ones, in my opinion. Also, be aware of some special interactions with certain classes and mechanics in game, basically to protect yourself and also give you extra strength, especially boulders. Make sure that you're paying attention to what your Stone Shaper opponent can do, because otherwise you'll get hit for over 100 damage in one combo, and that's not fun. So make sure that you are doing everything in your power to avoid that. And make sure that you have a purpose for your build and play around your win condition. And I did spell it right this time. You can see there, W-I-N. Isn't that beautiful? But yeah, have a purpose for your build. Make sure you're playing around that purpose, and make sure you're always playing to your win condition, whatever style of class or offhand or rune that you're running. And that is going to be the end, the complete end of Spellbreak Academy episode number 4 for Combat Basics. Do hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button, and also check out the other videos that will probably be in your recommended feed, but also on the channel itself. Of course, the future of this channel, I will be covering Spellbreak just like normal, and hopefully get more frequent videos out. This one I was procrastinating on for the longest time. I don't know why. I was able to make that previous video in like 30 minutes flat, literally from start to finish. But this one, I don't know what it was. I guess I just procrastinated, but I'll have the next one out hopefully before a week from now. And also be on the lookout for a little bit of variety. I am building a very, very close relationship with some of the Crimson Desert devs, so expect more content on that once more news comes out. And also I'll be streaming all kinds of games, so check that out. Make sure you tune into those streams. I don't have a stream schedule, but I'll be make sure to tweet it out. So go follow me on Twitter. Make sure you go join the Discord as well, where you get more updates. And thank you guys for watching. I've been OSK. I'll see you in the next Spellbreak Academy episode, and y'all have a wonderful day. See you out there.